I'm Lillian, and this is where my story begins, or maybe where it starts to twist. I was 24 when I lost my parents. They left me the house, a bunch of memories, and my little sister, Zoe. She's tough as nails, that one, studying to be a lawyer. We only had each other, and that was enough, or so I thought until Michael walked into my life. It was a regular day at the office when I first met him. He was the new guy, assigned as my assistant. "Hey, I'm Michael," he introduced himself with a grin that had too many teeth. "Heard a lot about you, the go-getter of our department. Excited to be working with you." I remember nodding, giving him the rundown of our projects, expecting him to be like any other assistant I'd had, nervous, scribbling notes. But Michael, he just watched and listened, his eyes never leaving mine, like he was studying me more than the work. The courting started subtle. Coffee on my desk every morning, his treat. "Gotta keep the boss happy," he'd say with a wink. Lunches together, where he'd ask about my life, my dreams, why I never wore my hair down. Then came the dinner invites. "Come on, Lillian, just one dinner. Let me show you how I cook," he persisted one evening as we were locking up the office. As dinners became a regular thing, so did his stories about future and family. One night, he dropped the bomb. "Marry me, Lillian. Let me take care of you." I took the ring. It was beautiful, simple, but insistent, like him. "I'll think about it," I said, and I did. I thought about it all night and all the next day. When I finally said yes, it was with a mix of love and something else, apprehension, maybe. "I love you, but I don't want to quit my job, Michael. I worked hard to get here." "We'll figure it out, Lil," he assured me, his hand tight on mine. "Trust me." We got married, and I handed in my resignation a month later. My boss looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "You sure about this, Lillian?" he asked as I cleared out my desk. "Yeah, I think so," I lied. Michael was thrilled, planning our future with the kind of detail that scared me a bit. "You won't regret this," he kept saying. But as I packed up my things, I wasn't so sure. The morning after I left my job felt weird. I woke up without an alarm, which was strange enough, but the day stretched out before me with nothing urgent waiting. No emails, no meetings. Just the quiet of the house and a deep, nagging doubt. Around noon, Michael called. "Hey, babe, how's the first day of freedom?" His voice was chipper, too chipper. "It's quiet," I replied, picking at the edge of the kitchen counter. "Enjoy it, Lil. It's what you deserve after all that grind. Tonight, let's go out, celebrate a little." He was always planning, always moving. The days started blending into each other, each one a repeat of the last. I'd wake up, make coffee, and then try to find something to fill the hours. Cleaning, cooking, more cleaning because what else was there to do? On one of these aimless days, Michael came home, his face flushed, a sparkle in his eye that was new. "Guess what?" he burst out before I could even say hello. "I got promoted. They're giving me your old job." His excitement was palpable, and it stung more than I expected. "That's great," I managed, forcing a smile. "Really great, Michael." The following weeks were tougher. I saw less and less of Michael as he threw himself into work. I spent my days wandering through a too-quiet house, my tasks feeling more and more pointless. Calls to Zoe were the only thing that kept me anchored. "Lillian, this isn't you," Zoe said one afternoon. I'd called her in tears after a particularly bad day when everything felt overwhelming. "I don't even know who me is anymore, Zoe," I confessed, sitting on the kitchen floor, phone pressed against my ear. "You're someone who loves her work, who fights for what she wants. You're not this housewife Michael's turned you into." Her words were a slap, harsh but necessary. "I thought it would be different," I admitted. A few weeks later, Michael's new salary slip came in, and the numbers didn't add up like we'd hoped. Rent, bills, his student loans, it was too much on just his income. I approached him one evening, the bills spread across the kitchen table. "Michael, we need to talk. It's tight this month, really tight. I think I should look for a job again, help out." He frowned, clearly not pleased. "Lillian, we talked about this. You staying home was part of our plan. We can manage." "But we aren't managing, are we?" I pushed back, frustration growing. "Look at these numbers. We're barely scraping by." "That's just for now. I'll get a raise soon, things will settle." He was dismissive, already turning back to his laptop. I stood my ground. And then he dropped a bombshell. "Or we could move in with my parents. Save on rent. What do you think?" I wasn't thrilled at the thought of living with his parents, but desperate times. "Okay, let's try it," I agreed, though every part of me screamed that it was a mistake. "Great, I'll call them in the morning," he said, already looking relieved. But as I went to bed that night, the thought of what I'd agreed to filled me with dread. Was I trading one cage for another? When we arrived at his parents' place, Linda greeted us at the door with a tight smile. "Welcome. It's so good to help out family," she said, her voice sugary sweet. But her eyes scanned our boxes like she was tallying up an invoice. "Thanks, Mom. Lillian's really grateful, aren't you, babe?" Michael nudged me, a little too hard. "Sure, thanks, Linda," I said, forcing a smile. The first few days were awkward. John, Michael's dad, was mostly quiet, nodding along to whatever Linda said. Linda ran the house with a list of rules that she handed over on our first evening. No shoes in the house. Meals at 7. Laundry days are Tuesday and Thursday. And we appreciate if you keep your room tidy, she recited, as I nodded, feeling more like a boarder than a family member. "Got it," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. The real challenge came with sharing the space day in and day out. Linda had a way of making her presence felt. One morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when she walked in and frowned at the way I placed the cups. "Lillian, dear, we keep mugs in the left cupboard. And use coasters. This table isn't just any old piece of furniture," she chided, rearranging what I had just set out. "Right, sorry," I mumbled, feeling clumsy in my own movements. Michael was out early most mornings and back late, leaving me to navigate the choppy waters of living with his parents on my own. Most days, I tried to stay out of Linda's way, but that seemed impossible. Every move I made seemed to irk her in some way. I started to feel like I couldn't do anything right. One evening, Michael noticed my frustration during dinner. "What's up? You've been quiet tonight," he said, barely looking up from his plate. "Just tired, I guess," I said, not wanting to start a conversation that wouldn't end well in front of his parents. "Living here's supposed to make things easier, you know." "You don't seem to be making much of an effort, Lillian," Michael said, his tone a mix of annoyance and fatigue. I looked at him, stunned. "I'm trying, Michael. It's not exactly easy, you know. Let's talk about this later." He dismissed the conversation with a wave of his hand. The later never came. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself often cornered by Linda, her commands unending. I became her shadow, trailing behind her as she pointed out things to clean, meals to prepare, or errands to run. The days had turned into a blurry slog, each one more draining than the last. I kept my head down, trying to avoid any unnecessary interactions with Linda, but she seemed to have a radar for when I was around. It was a Tuesday morning, a day marked for deep cleaning according to Linda's strict household schedule. I was dragging the vacuum cleaner out when she appeared in the hallway, her arms crossed, her expression sour. "Lillian, don't forget the windows today. They're looking disgraceful," she said, her voice slicing through the morning calm. I nodded, pushing down the irritation bubbling inside me. "Got it, Linda. I'll make sure they're done." As I set up the ladder to start on the windows, the dull ache in my stomach from the past few days flared up again. I ignored it, attributing it to stress or maybe something I ate. But as the morning wore on, the pain intensified, sharp and unignorable. By the time Linda came to check on my progress, I was pale, clutching my side. "I'm not feeling great," I managed to say, my voice strained. Linda eyed me skeptically. "Really? Today of all days? The windows aren't going to clean themselves, you know." I tried to steady my breathing, pain shooting through my abdomen. "I think I need to see a doctor." Linda scoffed. "It's probably nothing. Just finish your chores, then you can rest." But I couldn't. The pain was too much. It was all I could do not to cry out. I made my way slowly to the room I shared with Michael, hoping to lie down for a minute, but Linda was on my heels. "This is unacceptable, Lillian. You're acting like a child," she snapped as I collapsed onto the bed. "I think it's something serious, Linda," I gasped, the pain overwhelming. She stood in the doorway, frowning. "Fine, I'll call Michael, but I'm telling you, you're overreacting." The wait for Michael felt endless. When he finally arrived, his concern seemed genuine, but it was tinged with annoyance. "Mom said you're making a big deal out of some stomachache?" "It's not just a stomach ache, Michael. I can barely move," I whispered, feeling weak and exhausted. At the hospital, the diagnosis came quickly: appendicitis, and I needed surgery immediately. The relief of knowing it wasn't all in my head was overshadowed by the fear of what was coming. After the surgery, I woke up groggy and disoriented. The doctor explained there were some complications, and I'd need to stay a bit longer than expected. Days passed with no sign of Linda or John, and only occasional, brief calls from Michael asking when I'd be home. It was Zoe who came to see me every day, her face tight with worry each time she looked at me. "You look like hell," she said one day, blunt as ever. "Feel like it, too," I replied, trying to manage a weak smile. "This is messed up, Lillian. You shouldn't be alone through this," Zoe said, her anger evident. I nodded, feeling the tears well up. "I thought they'd at least visit. I'm their family now, aren't I?" Zoe's hand tightened around mine. "You're my family. And I think it's time you start thinking about what you want, not what Michael or his mom want." The days in the hospital were long and lonely, giving me too much time to think about everything that had gone wrong since marrying Michael. When the day finally came for me to be discharged, Michael was too busy to pick me up. I ended up taking a taxi, the driver helping me out more than my own husband had in days. I got out of the taxi, feeling every ache in my body as I reached for my wallet. The driver waited patiently, but I realized I didn't have enough cash on me. With a heavy sigh, I turned to Linda, who had come out to meet me. "Linda, I'm short on cash. Can you pay the taxi?" Linda frowned, her eyes narrowing. "Really, Lillian? After all the extra medical bills we've had to cover because of your complications, you still want more money from us?" Her words stung, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. "I just need to pay for the taxi, Linda. It's not like I plan to have complications." She muttered under her breath, finally pulling out her purse and handing the money to the driver. "You're costing us a fortune, you know that," she grumbled as the taxi drove off. Trying to hold back tears, I nodded and headed inside. The state of the house hit me like a slap. Empty bottles, pizza boxes, burger wrappers, all sorts of trash littered the living room. The kitchen was no better, with a pile of unwashed dishes teetering in the sink. It looked like no one had bothered to clean anything since I'd been gone. My eyes roamed over the clutter, a sinking feeling in my gut. "Linda, I just got out of the hospital. I need to take it easy." She appeared at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, her gaze critical. "I don't see why that should stop you from helping around here. We've all had to pitch in while you were gone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Helping? Linda, I can barely stand for long periods, and the doctor said." The doctor said," she mimicked, rolling her eyes. "You're here now, and there's work to be done." I was still in pain, my body screaming at me to rest, but I knew arguing with Linda was pointless. So, I started picking up the trash, each bend and stretch sending sharp pains across my abdomen. Linda hovered nearby, pointing out spots I had missed or things I hadn't done to her satisfaction. "You missed a spot there. Those dishes need a redo. Make sure you scrub that counter well." I worked through the pain and the humiliation, tears mixing with the sweat on my face. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted and hurting all over again. I managed to cook a simple dinner, though every movement was agony. Michael came home just as I was setting the table. Sitting down, he took a few bites of the soup I had made, then pushed the plate away with a disgusted look. "What is this? It's tasteless. Can't you even make a decent meal?" That was the last straw. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Without a word, I got up from the table and went to our bedroom, closing the door behind me. The room was silent except for the sound of my sobs. Linda's birthday was right around the corner, and the preparations had begun days in advance. The air in the house was thick with expectation, or more accurately, Linda's demands for a perfect celebration. "Lillian, I want those curtains washed and rehung before my friends arrive. And make sure the silver is polished," Linda ordered as she passed me a list that seemed to go on forever. I nodded, my hands already sore from scrubbing and cleaning nonstop. "Sure, Linda. I'll make sure everything's ready," I replied, trying to keep the exhaustion from my voice. As her birthday approached, the atmosphere in the house became even more hectic. Michael took charge of decorating the place, which mainly involved giving me instructions on where to hang decorations or place flowers. I was running on fumes, but every time I slowed down, Linda was there to remind me of the stakes. "This needs to be perfect, Lillian. Don't slack off now," she'd say, her eyes scanning for any imperfections in my work. The day of the party, I was up before dawn, baking and cooking for the event. As guests began arriving, I slipped into the background, serving dishes and pouring drinks, barely noticed by anyone, except to be given more orders. The party was in full swing, laughter and music filling the house, but all I felt was a growing sense of invisibility. I overheard Linda bragging to a guest, "Oh yes, Michael organized everything. He's been such a darling." My hands clenched at my sides, but I kept my face neutral, serving another round of appetizers. A month later, my own birthday rolled around. No decorations, no plans, nothing. It was just another day to everyone else in the house. In the evening, I decided to make something of it and cooked a festive dinner for myself. At the table, I mentioned casually, "It's my birthday today." Michael looked up, his expression annoyed. "Oh, right. Happy birthday," he said with a sigh, his tone devoid of warmth. "Remember, you still owe money for your operation." Then he got up and left to play computer games. Feeling the sting of his words, I decided I couldn't stay here any longer. I began to pack some of the food I'd cooked, planning to take it to my sister Zoe's place to have at least some semblance of a celebration. Linda walked into the kitchen just as I was wrapping up some leftovers. "What are you doing? Stealing food now?" she accused sharply. "I'm not stealing. It's my birthday, and I'm taking some food to my sister's," I replied, my voice firm yet weary. "If you want to leave, then go. Take your things and get out," Linda shouted, her face red with anger. Before I knew what was happening, she grabbed me by the arm and shoved me toward the door, pushing me out without even letting me grab my coat or purse. "And don't come back," she yelled as she slammed the door behind me. Standing in the street, shock washed over me. Fortunately, I had my phone in my hand. Shivering, I dialed a taxi and then called Zoe to tell her I was coming. "Zoe, I'm done there. I'm coming over now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come here, Lil. We'll figure this out." Zoe's voice was a lifeline in the chilling evening air. When I arrived at Zoe's, the relief of seeing her familiar face was overwhelming. She opened the door before I even knocked, pulling me into a tight hug. "Lillian, are you okay? Tell me everything," she urged, leading me into the living room. I set down my small container of birthday food on the kitchen counter and collapsed onto the sofa. "It was awful, Zoe. After everything, Linda she threw me out. On my birthday, no less," I explained, the words tumbling out amidst sobs. Michael didn't stop her? Zoe's tone was incredulous. He wasn't there. He left to play games right after giving me a lovely reminder that I owe money for my hospital bills, I said bitterly. Zoe shook her head, disgust evident on her face. You don't deserve any of this, Lillian. None. You need to think about yourself now. What do you want to do? Taking a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on me, I found the words. I think I want a divorce, Zoe. I can't live like this anymore. Good. And you know I just started working at a law firm, right? I'll represent you. It'll be my first case, but I promise we'll do everything right, Zoe declared, her determination clear. A week after my disastrous birthday, Michael called. Lillian, why aren't you home yet? His voice was irritated. I'll be there this evening, I said tersely, and hung up. That evening, Zoe and I drove back to what was no longer my home. As we walked up to the door, my stomach churned with nerves. Linda opened the door and immediately started on us. Where have you been? Look at this mess. You owe us, Lillian, for everything. I remained silent, letting Zoe take the lead. We're not here to clean or pay you, Zoe stated firmly. We're here to collect Lillian's belongings and inform you formally about the divorce proceedings. Linda looked taken aback. Divorce? Who will do all the work around here? Who will pay for the operation and all we've done for you? Zoe didn't flinch. In court, we will present evidence of how Lillian was treated and the delayed medical assistance she received. There's documented proof of her condition, bruises, and all. Also, it's clear Michael took over her job under false pretenses. Linda and Michael exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Michael stepped forward, his hands outstretched in a weak attempt at reconciliation. Lillian, you're misunderstanding everything. I was just trying to teach you how to be a good wife. I stepped back, my decision solidifying with every passing second. No, Michael. I understood everything perfectly. Walking out of that house with Zoe felt like stepping into a new world. My world. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal preparations and meetings, all leading up to the divorce proceedings. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. My stomach churned as we entered the courtroom, the weight of the upcoming battle pressing down on me. Michael and his parents were already there, looking uncomfortable in the stark, formal setting. As the proceedings began, Zoe was calm and focused, presenting the evidence of how I had been treated, the late medical help, and the way Michael had manipulated me into quitting my job. She spoke confidently, laying out everything in stark, undeniable terms. When it was Michael's turn, he tried to downplay everything. Lillian's making it sound worse than it was. We were just trying to help her, he said, his voice unsteady. Help? By isolating her and making her work without any support while she was ill? Zoe countered sharply, her tone making it clear she found his defense pathetic. Walking out of the courtroom, the weight of months of tension and uncertainty lifted off my shoulders. The judge ruled in my favor, granting not just the divorce, but also $150,000 in compensation and regular alimony payments. Michael lost his job once our employer found out how he'd manipulated the situation at our workplace to oust me. And his parents, they had to sell their house to cover the compensation and move to a less prestigious area. Returning to work was like stepping back into a life I had put on pause. My colleagues welcomed me back with open arms, and my boss gave me a brief nod that said more than any words could. Glad to have you back, Lillian. We've missed you around here. Life found a new rhythm, one that was more my own than it had ever been. I moved back into my parents' house with Zoe. Living with her, I found not just a sense of safety but also a shared determination to never let ourselves be trapped in such dire situations again. One evening, as Zoe and I sat on our porch, reminiscing about the past months and planning for the future, I realized how much I had changed. You know, Zoe, for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my life, I said, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Zoe nodded, her expression thoughtful. You've come a long way, Lil. You stood up for yourself, fought back, and here you are. It's more than just winning a case, you've won back your life. Here's to new beginnings, I said, raising my glass of lemonade, a small smile playing on my lips. To new beginnings, Zoe echoed, clinking her glass with mine, a sound as sweet as any victory bell.